Dear listeners, welcome to Australia podcast Scientist on Stage, a podcast that shines light on the human being behind the scientist. A meaningful conversation with the scientist about their own journey, about logic and rationality, and the hidden emotions behind that rationality. These are their authentic stories. No borders, from creativity to science. Our guest is David Fernandez Rivas, co-founder and CSO, Chief Scientific Officer of Flowbeams and Bub Clean, professor at University of Twente in the Netherlands. How was his journey from Cuba to the Netherlands, and how can we keep staying true to ourselves in such a journey? David shares with us how he connects with others through music and joy, as we all contribute to a scientific party. We talked about entrepreneurship, connect faster and better with societal stakeholders, taking risks, but also about creativity, being in own bubble, and teaching a new generation of scientists. And what does he call actionable empathy? Let's find out. David, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
We are very curious to hear a little bit from you, who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do.
Well, I will have to probably begin on the journey that led me here. From early age, I always wanted to solve problems or fix toys. Back in Cuba, when I was growing up, you only got by the government one toy a year. So if your toy will break, you have to fix it. So years later, I realized that the best way to exploit that passion, becoming an engineer and working at a university, was the unique place where I could do all that.
What inspired then you to do the study that you do?
When I was growing up, I could see in my family, they were my parents, the first in their families to go to university, so first generation going to university. And my mom studied chemical engineering, and my father studied more humanistics, English language. So I had at least two reference points. Ultimately, when I chose to go for nuclear engineering, which was my training, it was in a period that I was very much interested in energy and the human body. And then I thought that if I could work in a place where new technologies could be found, then we might get to understand better the energy from our bodies, all this idea about chakras and energy. I said, well, many years ago, X-rays was probably a myth because there was no technology to let you use it or demonstrate that it existed. So with that naive approach, I said, well, maybe entering the nuclear engineering field, I could work at the smallest scale that you could think between matter and energy.
That's nice to hear. How was your journey to come all the way to the Netherlands?
The shortest path that I can describe is that during my undergrad years, I had the possibility to participate in an international project funded by the International Atomic Energy Agency. And I was in my first year as an engineer, and one of my good friends from the radiochemistry department, a student, said that he had joined a research team and they were looking for an engineer to help them, do their job. And well, I raised my hand, I got in, and I started working back in 2000 in computational fluid dynamics, which back then was emerging. Nowadays, everybody gives for granted that it's a thing. But I had to then start learning on my own because nobody in my institute knew anything about it. And we won a prize. It consisted on international email access and access to the internet, which again, many people give for granted now, but back then it was an exception in Cuban universities. This led me to get in contact with researchers from all over the world. And with one in particular, in Germany, I managed to go for summer school in different topics around chemical engineering, but I got fascinated already on the elements of microfluidics, computational fluid dynamics, and there was kind of a new area that had not been explored before. A couple of years later, I managed to then participate in a summer school in Trieste, and ICTP, so International Center for Theoretical Physics in Italy, where I met a couple of professors, one of them from the Netherlands, from the University of Twente. And 1 year later, after keeping contact via email, he offered me 2 positions from which I could choose. And this was more or less the shortest path that I can explain how I ended up doing first my PhD in Twente from 2007.
How does this journey to the Netherlands and living here for so many years transform you as a person, and maybe embracing different kind of culture, different way of communicating, different way of doing leadership, different way of working together in science? How did that transform you?
I think the transformation was already happening when I came in 2007. I had already visited several countries, mostly Germany, Italy, Chile in South America. And then I found a level of flexibility and support from the professors and technicians around me in Twente that I haven't seen elsewhere. So the transformation was made possible because of that trust that my direct supervisor, Professor Harniers in Twente, saw in me, and he and many other colleagues in the faculty over the years gave me the possibility to find my own ways. In the social aspects, of course, Cuba and the Netherlands have many differences, but the bike element for me was familiar already, because during the 90s, after the Soviet collapse, there was no transportation in Cuba available, so bike was for me, the usual way to move around. And the rest has been made possible because of friends and building my own bubble ecosystem, bringing music and cultural activities to the university beyond the traditional research and publishing your papers and that type of things.
Tell us more about bringing the music to the university. What do you do?
When we were PhD students, I had the privilege to start 2 music bands. I already had some experience from Cuba, and then in the Netherlands first we created a trio where we were playing mostly blues, rock and roll music with 2 friends, one from Mexico, another one from Canada. In a party around the same time, back in 2008, with more Latin friends, we realized, hey, we have enough people to start like a Latin band, and that we named Chilangos Habaneros. And we ended up playing even in scientific events organized by some professors at the University of Twente. And it was very funny. One day, in that event, many of the people who were giving lectures in the morning or standing in front of posters, during the dinner, we all went on stage and started playing, and that was a very interesting moment to see the faces and the jaws of people drawing down, seeing that the professors or technicians or PhD students were now playing on stage.
Oh, this is beautiful, because in fact we bring the creativity when it comes to then the arts back to the university in a way, and I do see very young generation very active in that respect. That's nice to see. And I recall the moment where we were at the physics conference, NWO physics conference together, when we organized Physics Got Talent, that you came on stage together with a few of your colleagues and even your research group, and encourage everybody to sing with us, to dance with us. That's very nice that you do.
Yeah, I truly believe that we should not create very stiff borders from what our personal taste is and who we are in our work, because at least in academia, you really need to like and believe in what you're doing. So if you start creating too much compartmentalizations of who you are and what you do, then you might face some troubles down the road. So culture has the possibility to unite us, no matter what our background is, what language we were raised with. Even if you are from a different discipline in academia, you can understand music, you can understand melodies, you can understand art as a general form. So I think that cultural activities have a great positive impact in the academic and scientific work we do.
Very nice that you say that, because often we think who we are, we say I'm a scientist and that defines us, so kind of the job defines us, and that we know quite well. The scientists, researchers in general think like that. And now you do bring another flavor from another field, if I may call it like this, as such. But still, sometimes I feel like we are quite often in our own bubbles. And then when connected to society, how we do connect with the society and what we do to connect with the society. How do you think about that connection and living in the bubble from the academic environment and the connection with the society around us?
Yeah, I think that saying that we should not have borders or compartmentalization be seen as a strong statement. I think we need some sort of delineation to understand from which standpoint or which set of tools you have at hand. You might be a full professor in engineering, and that when you say it to the general public, they might understand that on a daily basis you are busy with education or research, inventions. But then when you go home, you might also be trainer for the soccer team of your neighborhood. So it's the same person, and then you need to learn in which bubble you enter. So the idea is that the bubbles or the limitations might exist, but we should be less afraid of crossing them, because it doesn't change who you are. It changes just in which context you are supposed to say something or act accordingly.
At times we used to say that we are professors in the ivory tower. And what you're saying now is that we get out of the ivory tower to connect with people also in the weekend time and have conversations and such. Do you still feel sometimes that we are in our own ivory tower?
The ivory tower analogy for me is a bit tricky, because in the Netherlands there are not so many tall buildings. So you could say that everybody's more or less at the same level. Of course, that in practice is not the case. What I think we should train the younger generations to understand that they need to be active and move around. So happiness doesn't happen in a specific place, sometimes not even in the same time. So you need to integrate or experience in different moments in your life, different places, to find where is that you yourself are happy, and how can you make then, as your next layer of responsibility, your family happy and safe, and then the rest, looking at the family as the nucleus of society, then how much can you extrapolate that positivity and good experiences that you might have as an individual, as a family, and then bring it to society. So that's my strong belief, that if you are true to yourself, it doesn't matter if you are then a professor at which level, or if you also do volunteer work, it's you yourself who can make some choices and decisions on what type of impact you want to bring to the society you're living.
What does it mean to be true to yourself? Who are you true to yourself?
I think of myself now, which is probably slightly different than a few decades ago, as an individual that is trying to solve problems, and not out of the satisfaction on putting my name on it to say I solve it, or this is a David theory or whatever, even though some friends sometimes try to joke about this. They even call me the comandante or the boss, but it's mostly in musical settings, because somebody needs to set the rhythm, or what are we going to play at a wedding or something like that. In my own personal journey, I realized that I have had the privilege to set a bit the course, and saying, okay, I'm an engineer, I was trained with a different set of skills and tools than the world I'm living in, and it's nobody's fault. So I have been flexible enough with myself to agree that I don't know everything, and I need to learn new things, and I need to ask for help or collaboration from other colleagues that might know other aspects of the solution better than I. And what I really want to keep doing is having the freedom to identify there's this problem that affects maybe a large group of the population or the environment, and with my understanding and the knowledge that I have and my skills, I think I can slowly work towards a solution. And that solution might be in a short term, might be in a longer term, but that is what defines who I am and why I'm doing the work I do.
You said many interesting things, and I want to come back to some of you. You said that being the boss, or sometimes you're called like that in the musical world, and at the same time you're open to ask for help. Is it easy for you to ask for help?
For me, it comes naturally because when you are trained as a nuclear engineer, there are many things that you receive in your undergrad years that I didn't get. Or when I came to the Netherlands, all this, even the traffic rules and the signs are very different. So if you don't ask around, then you might get into difficult situation. So asking for help, I actually use the analogy with my PhD students when we are defining authorships of a given paper. I like to see a publication or scientific publication kind of as like a party that you invite several people that are contributing to the party. Some might be bringing the drinks, another person might bring some food, the other person is good at making jokes. But if everybody has a piece of the puzzle, then that article to me looks much better and stronger than if it's written by myself or in a duo case.
Now we're talking being the boss in a way. We call it to be in the leadership position. Tell us more how it is for you to be in the leadership position. Do you see there differences in cultures, for instance? How do you work together with others as different generations, if I might call all of us like this, without putting anyone in the boxes? But we do see differences there. How it is for you to be in a leadership position, how you handle that?
That is one of the beautiful challenges that I have experienced probably since my teenager years, because out of personality, I'm a good person to work with, but many times I have been in a position to lead, not necessarily because I might be the smarter or whatever. It's more having a vision or an idea and then recruiting or persuading people to join me in that journey. One example in music groups, some of my friends said I'm not so good, at percussion, or I cannot read the scripts or the scores of music. And I typically would encourage, well, it doesn't matter. The whole idea is that we are going to spend an afternoon together playing some songs that we might like. So for me, leadership is not seen as like being on top. It's more like giving a purpose or giving a course of action. And then depending on in which stage in my career I have been, the way that I have supervised PhD students at the beginning are very different than I see it right now. And what you say about cultural background and age differences, I think that is what keeps it exciting, because you need to revisit yourself continuously. Is my communication style the best for this particular scientist? Can I do something better to adapt myself to this new scientist, younger scientist that has this or that ambition? How can I channel that ambition to the right path that is not necessarily serving me?
That is what we call adaptive leadership. The way you supervise students in the past is very different than now, and you have adapted to that. Can you give us maybe some examples on how it used to be in the past and how is it now? What have you learned on the process, and what things do you do specifically different now?
I believe that also the topics that I have been investigating are so different that the students that I have worked with all have different background. Just to give you an example, some of my topics are in electrochemistry, and then the physics or the training of these scientists is very different than injecting into skin. Then you have bioengineers that are trained with a different set of tools and methods to attack problems. So I cannot say that I found a golden rule to guide them all. What I have changed is probably making myself available in the way that the scientist needs. So I don't need to be sending all the time emails, but I'm reachable via WhatsApp. So some students might need it, some not. Is their choice. So they can find me in many different ways, via an email, WhatsApp, or a phone call. And some younger generations are not so eager to make a phone call. So they either prefer to text or even just meet, but they are afraid of the phone. So this is something I've learned in the last 5 years, which for me was a surprise.
Yeah, sometimes if we do call someone, then it might be received as there is an emergency and something is bad happening, isn't it? Yeah.
That's a possibility, yeah.
Yeah, and then the world around us is changing quite a bit. We see the effects of what happens typically globally and in the political field and atmosphere that affects us also as scientists. You're coming from University of Twente, where a lot of the colleagues were let go, if I can call it like this. The current moment where we are recording the podcast is half April. How do you feel about the situation right now, and how do you see the steps going ahead?
When I talk to my colleagues outside of the Netherlands, everybody is surprised that people with tenure and full professor titles with almost no warning are laid off. I think that many of these colleagues probably couldn't have done anything different from what I understand about the process, because I don't have all the pieces of the whole procedure. I think that this is a moment where many people saw it could come. The academic world in general is probably not the most efficient in running a business, and that is known. So science, like art, is not designed to be efficient. Sometimes you need to let people wander around, a bit of a freestyle improvisation, so that you can make discoveries. What I think accelerated the situation we are suffering now in the Netherlands is that we have a new government that looks at the academic and cultural activities in a very different way than the previous administrations. And it's not only a Dutch phenomenon, we see it also across the Atlantic and in other places. Even in Europe, has already happened for decades in Eastern European countries. So my main point to the colleagues is, how can we connect faster and better to the societal stakeholders that are not us? Because even though I don't think of myself as an elitist, if you look at the statistics, the number of citizens that make it to the university is quite small compared to the rest of the population. So in a way, we are privileged and we are an elite. Now, can we use all this technology at hand to make our work and our contribution to society clearer to the farmer, to the less educated citizen living maybe around the corner from my house? And here I have one idea I have floated several times. If we could ask one of these fancy AI movie making machines, for example, for Delft, define Delft in 5 years if the university all of a sudden disappears. And then if we could use those little videos, maybe in TikTok or Instagram or whatever, then the positive impact of the academic world, be it education or research, then it would be clearer to the people that on a daily basis have no clue of what happens inside the university. So I think it's a searching inside how we can make it better, because the economy goes up and down. All the universities have seen cuts and dismissals before. My main concern is, if this is a natural process, how we can make the process less painful and mitigate the chances of another event like that in the short time.
It's very, very beautiful that you do say that you feel part of a university, and then sometimes scientists are seen as elites, but in the same time we have respect for practical oriented people in the society who in fact we cannot function without each other.
Yeah, I mean we need them to
bridge each other,
because sometimes you might be developing a technology that is now helping the farmer to increase the efficiency of his milking production. So the cheese that everybody has on their bread in the Netherlands probably has been the product of many years of research, and that you have a cheese there that is very efficient, that is very healthy, unless you put too much salt maybe. But if we make our job clearer to society and not only show up at the city center with a toga on the inauguration day, because that creates some sort of distinguishment, like, okay, this person is dressed like that and why not me? In other countries, an academic position is more hierarchical, more established. But sometimes I wonder, when I'm running around my neighborhood, I see some farmers milking their cow. What image do I give to that farmer? Or some of the secretaries living, or secretaries working in a company, looking at these professors always, looking at the sky and thinking about things that might never see the reality. So that is an exercise that I keep doing myself. How can we connect better and make evident that what we're doing has a value besides just funny dresses and handing out degrees to people once a year?
I see. You talk a lot about society and how we connect with each other. Are you seen in any way when you give the example for the music, or maybe when you're supporting your kids when they play football in the weekend? Have you seen in any way that people will look differently at you just because you're a scientist or because you work at university?
Personally, have not experienced that because I also have been living as a immigrant in a university city. So the neighborhood where I live, maybe there's one or two people who went to university. The rest, I'm not sure, because the way that society is, structured in the Netherlands is very different than in my home country. And I think the Netherlands is a unique place because the differences between the very rich and the very poor, are big, but in between there's a layer of a middle class that is very hard to distinguish. A professor at an academy or an engineering work or whatever will show up with a tie, fancy shoes, and his salary might probably represent a lot more than what a secretary at a university will have. But sometimes, you see people in the Netherlands with very decent salaries having an occupation that in any other country would be, at the lowest of the lowest. So I haven't felt any discrimination until now, but I think it depends a lot on in which circles of society are you swimming. Do you speak the language? Do you do crazy enough things? But yeah, maybe I'm too average in that way.
My question was not necessarily related that somebody will discriminate you in any way. In that respect, sometimes scientists may be seen by the rest as some gurus that know everything, and maybe you get questions that are expected always to be answered correctly from the beginning on, whether they are in your expertise, yes or no.
Luckily, I think that I have been surrounded maybe 80% by people who work or have a partner at the university or have been in that type of ecosystem for a while. I notice obviously when I speak to people who don't know me, it takes a while for them to realize that I'm a professor, because I have a tendency to not show off or not speak in fancy terms. Of course, if I'm speaking in Dutch, they can instantly see that I'm not from the Netherlands. But I try always to talk in the most direct language that I can find, without having to show that I have read that many books or have been in so many countries.
You also told us that you are the co-founder and the CFO of two companies. Would you like to share with us much more about what you've done, how you started your own company? What is your experience there?
The idea to become an entrepreneur was something that came around 2012 or 13. And that is a process that was probably happening without me being aware of it. The slogan of the University of Twente back then was the Entrepreneurial University. Until 2010 approximately, there was also a big scandal. They make a new logo, new design, and they removed that part. The way that I see entrepreneurship is also unique. I spent some years thinking for myself what it is, does it has value. For some people, being an entrepreneur, funding a company means, you want to get rich, or you want to, have your own job and don't answer to society and do your own thing, which is far from my own motivation. For me, the entrepreneurial definition comes more from making sure that if there's an invention or if there's a solution, even as low tech that you can think of, if there's a way to bring it to society in the most efficient way, then I want to be part of it. Some cases it requires making things for free and make it available for everyone. But coming from a socialist dream, giving things for free doesn't always end good. And this is also some of the problems that many very advanced economies are suffering. When you give things for free, people forget the value of having education, forget the value of having a doctor next to home. So I think sometimes you need to assign some values or create value so that society can defend it and people are willing to pay for it in a way that we can afford. Because it's no use to have fantastic technology that somebody might get rich, but nobody can pay for it. So that's one of my motivations, that whatever invention that I'm working on, we find the ways that it can be commercialized, not necessarily for my own personal gain, but for the betterment of society.
As being an entrepreneur, that brings a lot of risks. You take all the risks. You also get the glory when things are going well, but you also get everything on your shoulder in the moment things are not going well. Mm-hmm. How is your life as an entrepreneur and how you take the risks?
Well, the answer is relatively simple and connects what we were just discussing before. It's about asking for help. I know that I might be good finding solutions, crazy solutions to crazy problems, but to really make a business, you need more people to take care about the commercial story, the finances, doing things in the lab at some point. So the way to overcome those challenges is building support, not necessarily hiring people in the company. Sometimes you can get a lot of support from your institution or your friends or colleagues, and that's how I'm executing both my company work.
My own experience as an entrepreneur is that can feel, especially at the beginning, within one day at the top of the world, and at the end of the day at the bottom of the ocean, and it goes as a roller coaster as well. Have you experienced the same?
I agree with you, and depending on the stakes, how difficult I know people who can have had to go for months without getting income, and it's sometimes a bit unfair to put the balance of entrepreneurs on the economical gain or loss. The way I like to frame it is about the experience, because when you believe in something, even when things go wrong in the end and you have to close shop and your company doesn't make it, the take-home message that you as entrepreneur should take home is that you tried and then you did your best. And in a way that's similar to what happens sometimes in science, is knowing that some experiment might fail, but because it failed doesn't make you a bad scientist. It's what you do after. Do you stand up and try again? Or ask for collaboration with somebody who has an equipment that can measure what you were measuring? And then the experiences of your first company, then you can use in another company from somebody else, or you start a new one with another partner, and then slowly you learn. And that's one of the things that connect for me the experience of being at the university. It's the place where learning happens. And the learning doesn't need to be defined from the oldest to the younger. So it's a place where we can learn from each other, no matter in which stage we are. I learn a lot from the experiences of the younger researchers in my group. I learn a lot from older professors that are nearing retirement. And we learn a lot when we open the doors and small kids go to the lab and they start making questions that not even the youngest or the oldest scientists could have thought of. So the same happens in company. When you are an entrepreneur, you have to speak to so many people, and you only learn from those interactions if you are open to listening to them and understanding that they have a different view of the world, they have a different experience. And that's what I find enriching. That doesn't matter how static and how boring your current situation might be. When you open up a conversation with a young student or a potential business partner, you never know what will bring, and typically can bring good stuff.
We often say that spin-offs or startups, they only succeed if the teamwork is going well. And even the idea is very great. If the teamwork doesn't work, then the company doesn't run. How do you experience that?
That is something that we can connect to music experiences as well. If you have a perfect drummer that can set the timing of your band and your song, you are golden. Because even if you make a little mistake with the harmonic part, or somebody sings a bit of note out of note, or some chord doesn't really land, having that bass is important. So that said, even if you don't have the best drummer, but you have somebody who sings so well, so then your task as a leader of the band or guiding a research group is trying to see how you can make the sum of all the individual participants of the group or the music or research group to make it look good. So you want to show that even though individually all of these persons are having their own struggle, their own journey, after 2 years, 4 years in my group, I would like them to look back with a warm experience. Oh, I learned this, I learned that. Or my expectations were not met, but I got this new opportunity. So that I see it more as a process and not necessarily a checkbox like, okay, you have fulfilled all your requirements, now you can go into the wild as a professor or as ex-member of my music band.
With other words, you say, as a whole, we are stronger when we are together than each individual separate.
Yeah, and what brings us together is, in some cases, that thrill or that feeling that a song is going well, even though the whole song might not be good. If you record it and you listen back, sometimes those recordings are not the best, but there are a few moments during that song, for example, if you are performing or even in a rehearsal, everybody feels, oh, that went well. So that kind of a quality feeling or excitement or the ops that you were just discussing as an entrepreneur, some people would say this kind of addictive, so this sort of a roller coaster. So in that sense, I see many analogies with the scientific work that I do.
You also wrote a book about entrepreneurship. What motivated you to do something like this?
Well, many things motivated me, as almost anything in what I do. There was a combination of factors. For a few years, I was teaching at the master's level at the University of Twente, at the chemical engineering and materials disciplines. And I was teaching about innovation in chemical processes or in research settings, and I could not find a book. So I start struggling to identify if we really need to teach about innovation, then we need to talk about entrepreneurship. I already had a clear idea of what entrepreneurship was for me, but I didn't have yet the book that could give me the exercises and some of these things that traditional textbooks have. At the same time, COVID hit, and my PhD students were stuck at home. They could not go to the lab. I was also at home. I could not interact with my students the way I'm used to. And I start thinking, how can we transfer to these brains that are healthy in their own little rooms some useful message or some skills or tools, philosophical tools, to help them get over this lockdown, or how can we use that mental power to a benefit, not having to wait till everybody can go back to the usual. So then I put all this together and realized that what I was doing until then had some sort of value, and I start pitching to some friends, family, colleagues, the idea of writing a book. Some people told me, well, why? Are you going to make money? No, well, I have learned that most people who have written a book do it just because they want to take the message across. So if you have something to share, then you should do it. Because not everybody becomes a Dan Brown or, a success, Shakespeare. So that was more or less the motivation for me to explore writing a book. And it was materialized after I found a publisher that resonated with my vision, because what I was proposing didn't fit in any of the traditional textbooks. And then I made a mix of my own personal journey and my own framework that I developed in the process. And I managed to crystallize it to three main elements that have helped me define my message and what I do, and goes through three main pillars. One of them is knowledge, which most people see clearly, because if you are at the university, the stereotype is that, well, there's a lot of knowledge there. But many people are not clear if the knowledge is in the books or in the brains of the people walking around. And you need to hit somebody to take the knowledge out of their head. Then we move to persuasiveness as the second column of my framework. And that is necessary when you are asking for help. We talked about it earlier. When you don't have an answer to your question and it's not in any of the books that you assume there would be, then you need to reach out to somebody who might have the answer. And then the third element, which came naturally to me, but it took some time to convince people around me that it made sense, was empathy. Mostly because many successful CEOs are known to be jerks. And then I enter in some debates and try to clarify my vision about what an entrepreneur is and what is the role of empathy. And it's something that is very beautiful because I'm not the first one talking about empathy in the STEM disciplines, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And for me, empathy in this context, and I try to teach it as actionable empathy, is something that helps you or equips you to do something about it. And not necessarily, cry when things are going wrong or, feel frustrated for not being able to do. And when you mix these three together, then you have higher chances to do something beautiful, something of value for society. You might not have all the knowledge, but if you persuade somebody and empathize with that person, or you manage to connect with empathy with a potential user of the technology or the solution that you are having, it clarifies your goals and your motivations. Why are you doing what you're doing?
I want to talk a little bit more about empathy because it's a subject dear to me as well. And I see the empathy in different directions. There is one type of empathy which is rational empathy. We try to understand what's happening with somebody else. We mentalize it in a way. It's rational. Then we have the emotional empathy, which is we feel the same as somebody else does, as we would put ourselves in the shoes of somebody else. It can generate discomfort because we might feel the same as somebody else, and so we feel the pain of somebody else. And then we have the care empathy, what doctors do a lot in the hospitals, to take care of the others and make sure that at the end, through their empathy, their goal is to make sure that we get better. Now you're talking about actionable empathy, that you take action in a way to support that.
Well, this empathy for me was like a Pandora's box, because when you start opening it, there are many scientists and academicians and behavioral experts that have been looking at it for decades. So I have only scratched the surface. And I have found other schools in US, for example, trying to teach empathy to engineers. And there are many reasons why that is important. For me, the definition of actionable aligns with some existing definitions, like the ones you were mentioning. For me, it comes in balance with the two other skills or ingredients, knowledge and persuasiveness, is that if you only have one of the three, you might get into trouble or nothing happens. If we go for a moment back to knowledge, you might have a lot of knowledge in your head, but if you don't talk to people around and you pitch your idea, then nobody will ever know that it existed. Now, if you persuade only without having much knowledge or empathy with the people around, then you might fall in the square of manipulation. Or then, what happens with politicians, or some people are trying to sell you something without really connecting to your needs. They're just trying to show their message. And then if you have too much empathy, if you see animals mistreated on the street, or you see how the world is being contaminated, but you don't have any knowledge on how to bring some solution, or you cannot persuade people to do something about that problem that is going to hurt you, as you're saying, then for me is the alignment of these three is important, because then if we start with empathy and then you say, this is a problem that I think should be solved, then you need to start looking into yourself. Can I do something about it? Do I have sufficient knowledge? I don't. Maybe I persuade my parents to send me to a school where I can, in some countries that you need to ask your parents to pay for your studies, for example. Or if you are a scientist and you are persuaded, if you are doing committee work and you are reviewing proposals, then you need to be persuaded. So this is also something that I always try to teach. Knowledge goes both ways, persuasiveness goes both ways, and empathy goes both ways. It's not only about the people in your team that you need to be empathic about, it's about the new generations, the sustainability element is there, our environment. But we also need to understand that no matter if I'm older and I'm already professor, many good ideas might come from younger scientists. So I need to be open and receptive and be persuaded. And then knowledge is not only about mathematics or physics, might be the phone number of the person who might know where venture capitals go for lunch, and then you go with your idea and you persuade them to fund your entrepreneurial concept. But it all goes through empathy, because you need to identify for who are we solving this problem, who can benefit from it. And then you need to empathize with all the stakeholders in the value chain, from the people who have the problem, who's going to fabricate or build the technology, who's going to provide the services, who's going to get rich. Can we moderate that richness? Can we do something, for example, in medical technologies, that the insurance companies take up the burden and not the parents of the patients? So that type of continuous way of looking at societal relevant problems is what drives me to do research and entrepreneurial activities.
You're also very much connected also with the medical world, because you are a visiting professor at Erasmus Medical Center in Rotterdam, and you're also affiliated with MIT. You have many things on your plate, from what you do at the University of Twente, being the co-founder and the scientific officer of the two companies you have, and affiliated to other universities and medical centers.
And young academies as well.
How do you manage all this?
The answer is doing the same, being who I am. So I don't change who I am if I'm talking to the Flowbeams, one of the spin-off companies. When I'm meeting with them, I use almost the same slides or the same tone of speaking to them as I would be speaking to my PhD students. Or if I'm in a department meeting, I'm the same everywhere. And that sometimes might rub some egos on some people, like somebody might say that I might be superficial, because when I'm in meetings, I don't need to go too deep to show that I know a given equation or that I have studied the topic for 10 years. So that is, I think, the only way that I can do all that work that you have mentioned in all these different places is me with the same set of moral values, the framework on how I approach problems, and teamwork is the thing that defines how I build my connections with collaborators and people that I'm supervising.
How does it make you feel when your colleagues say you might do things a bit superficial and you're only scratching the surface? How does it make you feel?
For me, it's not, I don't take it as a personal attack. It's a conscious choice and comes from knowing where my limits are. I'm not very good at memorizing specific equations. So if I need to come up with a spherical solution for equation X, I know where the book is, or I can nowadays with machine learning, all those things, getting access to all that information. That was one of the reasons why I was not, the top of my class in all the assignments. In some subjects I was better than in others. And this is what I keep telling the people that work with me. You don't need to be perfect at everything. You just need to be aware of where your limitations are. Don't hide them. Make it clear so that everybody knows what your limits are. And that also limits the chances of, getting into trouble, being perceived as manipulative, or getting a burnout when people are pushed to the limit. So for me, it's more like a recognition. Okay, it's good that you see it, because it doesn't mean that I'm not serious about what I'm talking. It's a conscious choice. I cannot go in depth in all the different topics that I work, but I'm willing to learn from the people who do know all the details.
Beautiful. In our podcast, we talk about the hidden emotions behind the rationality. And you mentioned a little bit the hidden pain. And can I ask you, share with us what hidden pains or what hidden emotions from everything we discussed today that we didn't cover yet? Who is then behind the scientists? What are the hidden emotions that you might experience sometimes, but not having the possibility maybe to manifest them in any way in the working environment?
I think that the pain that I have is not particularly for me, even though I have suffered from some discriminations on nationality and access to information, mostly when I was in Cuba, but even today, the United States has a strong position about Cuban nationals. So all these things is very personal, but I think there's a more collective pain that we need to find an antidote very fast as academicians, is that many governments are taking a standpoint against knowledge or highly educated people, and they are trying to cut funding. And if we as academicians have been working from a naive standpoint that society values what we're doing, but at some point the government or even the management structures on universities don't have a clear evaluation or assessment of the work we do, then that trust in the process is lost. So it might demotivate not necessarily all the people who are already put their whole professional career to this direction, but how are we going to guarantee that younger scientists take up the sacrifice or the commitment to start a professional academic career right now, when it's unclear if it's better, to go to a company managed by a egocentric rich billionaire. So that is more or less my concern, that we have put centuries of tradition on academic work, trying to update it regularly. I think society and the way that media is manipulating the news went too much faster than what scientists and academia has been able to equalize or talk at the same level and bring the messages clear enough so that we are not put in a corner like, oh, we are in an ivory tower. So the question is, how can we, take that ivory tower and pave the whole city with ivory everywhere? So that is, I think, the biggest challenge that we have faced for decades, and now facing these budget cuts, that dream might even take longer.
What I do like from what you're saying is that you just showed to us the empathy that you do have for the collective pain, as you call it, for all the scientists, but you're up for some actions and ideas, and we don't go too into depth on how I feel the pain, but rather I observe it, I see it, and right away I can think of an action, what we could do and what I can do. Such
Yes.
Beautiful to hear that. It comes the time to discuss briefly the question that we got from the previous interview we had at the podcast. The question that you got from the interviewer of our podcast from last time is, what would you have done differently in your career and why?
Well, my answer might feel a bit arrogant or know-it-all, but it's the best and honest answer I can give. With the information and the ecosystem that I had at every stage in my professional career, I think I did the best I could. I cannot see a moment where I can think of, oh, I should have done this different or not, because I take a good time to think about making decisions that might have impact not only in my own life, but also on the lives of other scientists. Sometimes you might have a PhD student that is really struggling in the first year of PhD. So some people will say, well, if this person leaves now the project, you cannot finalize the project because the budget, you cannot hire a new PhD student. So my point is, like, instead of torturing somebody for 3 more years, and then who knows what that could bring, how can we make this transition for that individual to maybe abandon the PhD degree, maybe taking a gap year or going to industry? So there are many options. So my point is that when I make a decision, I like to look not only at what it's going to bring for me, positive or negative, but the impact around me. In the first line, of course, family, but also the people around me.
In a way, you take the decision with the knowledge that you have at the moment. You take the knowledge that you have, and as such, you take the path in your career, if you can call it still path. You take the path in your career. Yes, beautiful. What would you like to ask the next one that we are going to have as a guest for us for the podcast?
Well, something that I have been thinking for more than a year now, since the results of the Dutch elections were made, and my work in the different young academies. I've been now for this last year member of the Global Young Academy, the Young Academy Europe, the Young Academy in the Netherlands, and the Young Academy in Twente, so at the 4 levels. I have been not surprised because I knew we all have been trained in different countries, different universities, different divisions in academia, from humanistics to geography, mathematics, engineering.
The full spectrum.
Yeah, and even though everybody speaks English perfectly with some accent, I think the biggest challenge is that we don't speak the same language. And I keep thinking, like, how can we improve that? And I haven't found the answer yet, so maybe your next podcast partner will have some answers.
Nice to hear. I love also the connection with, we all speak English with our own accent. I always say it's beautiful to hear the accent because that makes us authentic. Let's see how we can find common grounds to still speak English, but to understand each other. think
Yeah,
that's
or could be
your question.
another language, but we all need to be fluent in it.
Thank you very much for being with us. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, the pleasure is mine.